Okay, good morning. We'll get started. My name is Julie Shields Rutina, and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And I'd like to welcome you to this morning's webinar, Understanding State Financial Aid. This is a part of the MEFA Institute, which is, a training program for school counselors so that you can earn professional development points and learn a lot of information about planning, saving, and paying for college. And this is an important webinar this morning to learn all about the state's initiatives and programs that will be able to help you and your students. So let me just go through a few logistics and then I will introduce our presenters. So you have control of your audio. Please, if you have questions, we want to hear them. And I know Clantha and Robert want to answer them. So put your questions in the Q&A section below, and we'll be able to, or the chat, and we'll be able to answer those questions. And then if you need closed captioning, hit the live transcript button and you'll see the words that we're speaking on the screen. If you need to leave, you may do so. And tomorrow we will send you a link to the recording and to the slides. And just a few words about MEFA. MEFA is a state authority. We've been around for 40 years helping families plan, save, and pay for college. And we enjoy helping our families and also helping school counselors, college administrators, all with the same goal. And today, we actually were lucky. We have Dr. Clantha McCurdy, who's going to be with us, and also Robert Brunn, both from the Office of Student Financial Assistance. And they will share all of the work that they're doing at OSFA. And here are MEFA's social media handles, all ways that you can stay in touch with us and that we share relevant and timely information. And we'll get to questions afterwards. So now I am going to share the presentation. Sorry for the logistics. Okay. And Clantha and Robert, I am going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julie. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you in the audience today. I always look forward to presenting an update on Massachusetts state financial aid. Robert Brunn and myself are members of the staff at the Department of Higher Education. Julie, you can flip to the next slide, please. And we manage the Office of Student Financial Assistance, which is a division within the Department of Higher Education. Although the Department of Higher Ed serves the public higher ed system, the Financial Aid Office extends services to students who are enrolled in both public and private institutions. And you have our titles and our email addresses. You can take that down. I continue to work in a hybrid method, so I always list my mobile phone, which is the work issued mobile phone, so always available to assist you at any given time, even weekends if you want to call at that point. Next slide, please, Julie. You've probably seen this screen or this slide before, but it's been the work that we've been engaged in for the past 2 to 3 years. And our work is guided by an equity agenda, which we view as helping to achieve racial justice within the Massachusetts higher education system. And that further extends into financial aid. And we'll share a little bit with you on that. And I just want to thank Julie for managing or driving the bus for me on this. So you'll hear me say next slide. Thank you, Julie. So under the equity agenda, we are producing a system-wide strategic plan that places equity for underrepresented populations, our Black and Brown students, as a top performance and policy priority for higher education. And what that means for financial aid is we are seeking to achieve three overarching goals: make college more accessible and affordable for all Massachusetts residents, closing achievement gaps for students within their opportunities within the education system, and improving college completion rates. The equity agenda requires us to audit all of our existing policies, and those are policies within financial aid as well as academic affairs, fiscal affairs, all policies within the Department of Higher Education. The goal then is to eliminate any policy that presents a barrier for the pathways of students of color from fairly benefiting from state financial aid resources due to anything that's considered unfair. And this audit is being applied to all programs, as I mentioned. So wherever we have a policy, whichever division that policy impacts, it is being scrutinized right now. And what you might see in financial aid could be changes in deadlines, eligibility criteria, and even changes within our guidelines as we seek to make certain that the programs that we control directly from the office do not present barriers, as well as programs that we provide resources to the campuses, the same kind of thing. So we're guiding the work of the campuses. And what we will end up with is a strategic plan for racial equity that will impact financial aid based on a number of changes that you may see. Some of the policy levers that we've been engaged in over the past couple of years, I thought it might be good to just kind of give you an overview. So we're looking at policies in finance, policies in access, policies in retention and completion. And with those 4 quarters, I've just listed a few things that we've been engaged in. If you look at retention, we are showing a framework for student success, as well as the strategic plan for racial equity. If you look at access, we are looking at things like early college programs, our policies on SAT or other test scores. And I've put in Mass Grant Plus, which is a program that I'm going to speak to in a little bit. But as far as completion, we're going to talk a little bit about the Mass Pathway initiative that we have, emergency grants, completion grants, which we introduced this past year to help get students across that finishing line. But this is the way we viewed the work that we have under the equity agenda. And it's been quite busy at the Department of Higher Ed. It's just another way, fancy graph of looking at the work that we are doing. In the center is the equity agenda, and the little spokes show different things that we are concentrating our efforts on. Right at the top in the orange circle is Mass Grant Plus, and we will talk about that in a little bit, but staff across the system have been engaged in this. One of the things that I usually like to bring to you is a little bit of an update on our enrollment. And as you know, Massachusetts public higher ed system, like all others, have experienced declines in enrollment in recent years, some of which was expected due to the number of high school graduates, as we saw that number trend downward for a bit. The other reason for the decline has been mainly due to the pandemic, COVID-19. And I'm sure our K-12 system saw some changes in their enrollment, but we definitely experienced that in higher education, both public and private. The FY22 enrollment still shows a slight decline, but we are seeing some variations of promise in that the decline was not significant for some sectors like the state universities, and the UMass system is holding steady as well. So we are looking for some positive growth, perhaps in FY23, and that's more to come. Some of the reasons for enrollment trends, and you can't see this too well, but we point to things like students not feeling like the hybrid method or the online education was beneficial to them, changes in their economic status, the need for them to take jobs, what have you. You'll get a copy of this handout so you can see that a little bit more, but I should have done a little bit more to enlarge the screen, but there were individual differences for that decline. And a lot of it was based on how people were impacted by COVID-19. To get a sense of the enrollment report, I always provide the link, and you can go out to mass.edu at our data center, and you can pull up reports on enrollment as well as any other initiative that we have going on. So I would invite you to please take a look at our website. When you first open the website, it's going to show you initiatives that we have that are ongoing, and there's a wealth of information there, which would include financial aid and some of the things that we are doing under the equity agenda. But there's also a Tableau presentation for a number of our data points, and you're able to filter those to get at specifics for institutions, as well as things that we provide based on ethnicity, enrollment status, that sort of thing. So let's talk a little bit about goals, and our focus for this year has been the same as what we focused on for the last 2 years, hoping to improve student success, and we are getting at that through college access and affordability initiatives, college completion, elimination of achievement and opportunity gaps, hoping to have clearer priorities with also an expanded focus on support services for student success, and then shifting policies to impact state level and institutional level outcomes. So we expect our institutions to be aligned with this work, and we often will have funding tied to performance. Our colleges and universities don't like to hear that, but that's pretty much the direction that we are going into, trying to get money to institutions that need it most, that are serving higher concentrations of the populations that we are seeking to serve or help. Some of the initiatives that you might hear about, or if you go to the website, you will see early college. That's been a really wonderful program for us in the public higher ed system, but we also partner with private institutions where an institution will have a partnership with one or more high schools, or it could be a group of colleges that are performing early college programs for a group of high schools. And I like to say that when you attend the commencement exercises for our community colleges and you see the traditional students that they serve going through commencement, but you also see another group there, which are the high school students who will be graduating that same month, May or June, from high school, but they're at the college commencement because they will be graduating with an associate's degree. And this has been a major initiative for us, and it's resulted in a number of students graduating. And I keep thinking of the picture that I saw when I attended the Massasoit commencement. There were 69 high school students from 2 high schools that were receiving their associate's degree at the same time that Massasoit was graduating their students who had already completed high school. But the STEM Starter Academy, which has been around for quite some time, many of you might be representatives from schools that we have a Gear Up program in, and that program is federally funded, but tends to help us get students to the finish line, complete high school, and then on into college. And within the financial aid arena, just doing everything that we can to make college more affordable. And we'll talk about some of the initiatives in a minute that are shown here: Commonwealth commitment, things that we are doing as far as FAFSA completion, basic needs, food and housing insecurities, and of course, where I spent my last year working on a framework for support services for student success. So let's talk about some affordability options. And this is a program, Mass Grant Plus, one in which we've partnered with the governor's office, with the Executive Office of Education, and all of the public colleges in Massachusetts. Mass Grant Plus is purposed to provide need-based assistance to full and part-time undergraduate students who are enrolled in an eligible degree or certificate program. It's considered an extension of the Mass Grant Program, which is our primary need-based grant program, and intended to provide students with adequate resources to meet their cost of tuition, mandatory fees, and books. And I want to really highlight this program for you this morning because of the significance that it has in making college more affordable and the resources that we are putting into the program. It enables all low-income undergraduates to attend any public college or university without incurring debt for tuition, instructional fees, with a modest book allowance. It's funded out of our general scholarship account, which the legislature funds each year, putting in significant resources this year to continue this program. And it is awarded as the last dollar to meet the unmet need for students, primarily Pell eligible students at all four-year institutions, but Mass Grant Plus can be awarded to non-Pell students at community colleges. Students must be full-time at the four-year institutions, but they can be full or part-time at our community colleges. So this is rapidly gaining quite a bit of attention within Massachusetts, and you may in another year or two hear about Mass Grant Plus as Massachusetts Promise Program. We are a little bit away from it becoming a Promise Program, but as you are working with students and they're getting their award notifications, if they are attending a public institution and they have unmet need, if you don't see Mass Grant Plus there, you should send them back to financial aid to determine when that money might be awarded. Some schools may package it up front, others may wait until they know a little bit more about the student's decision before that money is dropped into their award package. So just to show, we started Mass Grant Plus in fiscal year 19, which would have been the 2018-19 year as a pilot at community colleges, and ran that for about 3 years before expanding the program to include the state universities. So since fiscal year 19, we've appropriated a little over $7 million for the Mass Grant Plus. That seemed to be sufficient to meet the unmet need for students based on the direct charges of tuition fees and then the book allowance. And then in FY21, the 2021 academic year, we added Mass Grant Plus to state universities, starting with a minimal allocation of $5 million. It was introduced during the spring term, so it was only $5 million, but last year, we had both the community colleges and state universities participating in the Mass Grant Plus, spending 7.1 at community colleges, and then $10 million at state universities. And then lo and behold, this year, we were able to add the UMass system to the Mass Grant Plus program. And you can see the amount of money that we've currently committed. There may be a little more added, 7 million at community colleges, 14 at the state universities, and close to 16 million at UMass. So this is really making a difference in how students can afford the cost of their education. And the focus right now is on just the direct charges for tuition fees and the book allowance. There is quite a bit of conversation about folding in charges for housing, room and board. And that is something that we are looking at. In fact, we are engaged in a finance study right now that is estimating, well, what would it cost to expand this program to include housing and other related educational expenses. Probably something that we won't get into right away as we look to sustain the financial need currently that we are purposed for, which is tuition fees and the book allowance. Another affordable opportunity that we've spoken to you about in the past is the mass transfer pathway. And this allows a student to enroll, or a community college student to lower their costs based on one of 5 of these pathways. And we can talk through those in just a bit. If you go to the next slide, Julie. So students are able to save anywhere from 11 to 40%, depending on whether they complete their gen ed courses and then transfer to a 4-year institution, or whether they complete all of their credits, 60 credits, and transfer, and whether they get engaged in the Commonwealth Commitment Program. So what happens through those is, if the student transfers with a certain GPA, as you can see from the next slide, and you probably can't see this very well, but there are different things that a student can achieve based on how they transfer. A to B is simply associate's to bachelor's degree, but transferring in with the GPA of 3.0 allows a student to get a tuition waiver. If they're in the Mass Commonwealth Commitment Program, they lock in their tuition and fee charges based on the level that the institution, the 4-year institution, charged when they first enrolled in that program at a community college. And there's also a way for a student who transfers before earning their degree to have what's called the reverse transfer, where once they've completed the sufficient credits and criteria, they can be reversely awarded the associate's degree. So this is a big partnership that we started a few years back with our community colleges and state universities and UMass. And it's really been something that we continue to improve upon, adding different majors and all to this. But the bottom line is that it offers students ways to save money if they're enrolled in the public sector and going into a 4-year institution to complete their degrees. I know this is not the best slide, but I will ask that if you go to mass.edu and put in math transfer pathway, you'll see all of this. This slide on Commonwealth Commitment just highlights the benefits of the program. And since you cannot probably see it too well, but you do see there on the right side that the student gets a freeze on tuition and mandatory fees based on when they're enrolled in the program. And if they complete 15 or more credits with the 3.0 in any term, they get a 10% rebate on the tuition and fees that they've earned. So there's a way also to save, and that rebate goes to them after the term has ended. So it's really like cash on hand. It is a program that we continue to work with, continue to improve. And once a student enrolls in Commonwealth Commitment, they're always in it. But to get the benefits, the student needs to complete the 15 credits and with the 3.0 GPA. And that goal has not been relaxed because we feel like to get students to complete within a certain time, we need to have that as a standard. Tends to work, and we keep seeing increased numbers, but it is another way of saving on educational expenses. The program is managed by Elena Kudos Levinas. She has a couple of roles at the Department of Higher Ed. She's Chief of Staff, and she's also an Assistant Commissioner within the Academic Affairs and Student Success Unit. I've provided her email address, but if you forget that, you can always reach out to us at OSFA and we can get assistance to you on any questions or information for students as well. So let's move to financial aid programs. And I always like to share with you what's happening as far as funding with financial aid. A year ago, I probably talked about the general scholarship account having the highest funding level in 30 years. And I'm coming back with the same story this year because we did move from $130 million to $175 million from FY 22 to FY 23. That increase was given to support the Mass Grant Plus program that we just talked about and the Mass Grant program. The other line accounts that fund state financial aid, you can see here for the Adopted and Foster Fee Assistance Program, there's $7.4 million. There's a last dollar foster child grant program that's completely portable. If the student qualifies, they can attend a college in Massachusetts or outside of the state at $1.2 million. That program has been around for a bit. And then the High Demand Scholarship, which is funded at $2 million. And I'm happy to see that that program is continuing to receive assistance, because when it started about 6 or 7 years ago, we had $3 million in there, and it was immediately swiped down to about $1 million, but it's steadily coming up. And then I always like to highlight that we spend an additional $60+ million in the various tuition waivers that are awarded. So Massachusetts looks a little bit better than it has looked in many, many years as far as financial aid. We still fall short of some of our peer states like New Jersey or Washington State. We may get there someday, but we are very happy with this budget and are anticipating similar funding as we look at FY 24. And I will say that our Mass Grant remains a flagship program, and it serves probably the largest number of students of all of the financial aid programs. So within the state financial aid programs, we have what every other state has. We have scholarships, grants, tuition waivers, but most states do not have a no interest loan, and we do have that. We can talk to you about that at some point. About 94% of our programs are need-based, or they are entitlement based on our workforce needs. The High Demand Scholarship that I just mentioned is related to our workforce needs, where we focus on the demands of Massachusetts employers. And our programs are categorized in two sources: centralized, which simply means that OSFA or the DHE funds students directly. We provide the award out to the student and notify the colleges. Colleges have to certify that the students are enrolled and remain eligible. Or they are decentralized, where colleges receive an allocation for various programs, and they award those funds to students based on the guidelines that we present or provide. And those guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, are under scrutiny going through our policy audit. So there may be some changes which may not be so visible to you, but to the campus, it will help to focus our direction and goals on the equity agenda. I'm going to pause just a quick minute. I'm assuming that there are no questions just yet. And if not, I'm putting up a list of centralized programs. These are the programs that the staff within the Office of Student Financial Aid are busy awarding or making awards to students. You might hear some of these: Christian Herder Scholarship, Public Service Grant, those 2 fee waivers, and of course, Mass Grant. Decentralized programs on the next slide.
And I will just say, Clantha, there are no questions yet, but I'll remind everyone, feel free to put your questions in. Thank you.
That sounds great. Okay. On the decentralized side, we have cash grant, both at the community colleges, state universities, and UMass. Gilbert grant for those students who enrolled in our private institutions, a part-time grant, and of course, we have a one family scholars program, which tends to provide assistance to students who have food and housing insecurities. That program started years ago, about 15 years ago, and served female students only, single parents, but it's changed to assist male and female parents who are having those insecurities. And it also offers a number of support services. Very wonderful program that we support. So and now at some point, I'm turning this over to Robert. And Robert, give me a thumbs up if this is where you start or if I'm still going. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think this is still your presentation.
All right, so let's go. So as you look at the application and overview of what we do, FAFSA is the unique application for all state financial aid programs. There are a couple of online programs that students apply to, and an example of those is a paraprofessional teacher scholarship or the high demand. But for the most part, everyone has to complete a FAFSA. And we receive well over 300,000 FAFSAs each year. Sometimes it's 350, sometimes it could be 330 or what have you. But I usually say an average of about 325 initial FAFSA applications. And all of our financial aid is processed through our system that's called Mass Aid. And it's an online system that allows institutions access to certify eligibility, provide other information to us. And it also allows students to go there, set up an account, and provide additional information. I know Robert's going to share some other things with you about that. But we continue to enhance Mass Aid system to eliminate or streamline the process, so students aren't having to mail or fax in information. It's a simple upload, and they do it from their phones or their laptops or whatever. And we've also gotten into the process of sending email and or text to students. We will only send a hard copy letter if we do not have a valid email address. And of course, students actually have to opt in to the texting process. But I can say that over the past few years, our focus has been on simplification for the student through their financial aid journey, always keeping our process aligned and mindful of what students have to go through when they access financial aid at the campus. So we try to be less burdensome and try to have clear alignment, also separation of what's required for a state program versus institutional and federal aid. Just one thing I'll mention about FAFSA completion. In 2017, it was December, I remember it distinctly, we started to provide feedback to school districts about FAFSA completion. And this is based on a partnership that we share with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. I can say that we keep trying to improve this process, because what it does is it does a match with each school's enrollment, and we provide an update as to whether your student has completed a FAFSA. Yes, is what it will show. And whether that FAFSA is complete or incomplete, it will give that, or whether there's no FAFSA. So if the student is not on that list, we assume that they've not completed the FAFSA. And that's provided through the Edwin Analytics portal that each school has access to. That FAFSA data is updated weekly. And right now you'll be seeing FAFSA data for 2023-24, as well as the current year's data, 2022-21-22. I'm sorry, 22-23, gotta get those years straight. But it has proven to be a wonderful tool. And sometimes the mismatch could be on how a student is listed at your campus, what name they use, or if it's hyphenated, and how they complete that FAFSA. But we are doing matches on other aspects with date of birth and things like that. And we did find a couple of years ago that students who were participating in early college or dual enrollment programs, when they completed the FAFSA, they would not indicate that this is their first year, never attended college. They saw themselves as, well, I've attended college, I have 30 credits or 16 or what have you. And so they list that they were in their second year. So we started to pull in both first time never attended records as well as sophomore year records. And it gives a much better match, and we are able to pick up more students, because as you connect with students and ask about FAFSA completion, and they tell you, yes, miss, I've completed it, and you're not seeing that, I think since we've added that second category or class of students, that has provided a better match. I pretty much talked about the collaborative that we have with DESE on FAFSA completion, but we are also engaged with them in another partnership, and it's a FAFSA completion campaign. We call it You Are Worth It, and it focuses on key application filing months. In fact, I think this year's campaign will launch in December and run through March. And what you'll see there will be a number of signages on billboards, public transportations, multiple email messages or other social media platforms, and workshops, and just things that are updated on the websites. We are partnering with other stakeholders, Gear Up, MEFA, MassEdCo, our State Financial Aid Association, and You Aspire. And we'll add anyone else to this group who wants to be part of it. But the goal is to make certain that we are reaching students from low income and the more disadvantaged regions of the state, because what we have found is Massachusetts FAFSA completion numbers are always good. You know, we're always in that top number 5 or 6, don't usually fall much lower than that, but the population that we really need to reach, we fall behind there. So these efforts are concentrated in making sure that low-income families and students of color are completing the FAFSA, and we will continue that. We are going into year 3 with this financial aid campaign. I hope you have seen it in your areas, and if so, give a thumbs up. If not, let us know, and especially if you think that your area is not being served, and we'll make sure we get services there. There's also a website that's listed where we will highlight any workshops or any activity that's going on at any point in time during the year. And this is something that we are following also at the request of the governor's office. Deadlines for FAFSA for Mass Grant. May 1st has always been our deadline. We've had that, I'd say probably goes back to the 70s. And the only change that we've seen in that May 1st deadline occurred during COVID, where we extended the deadline to July 1. And then, of course, for this current fiscal year, because the legislature gave us so much more money, we saw something that happened for the first time. They designated in the budget language August 1 as the deadline for Mass Grant. And I think that for us worked okay because of the amount of money that we received, but we have to provide to the U.S. Department of Ed 2 years in advance the deadline for state financial aid. So we've already provided that deadline for next year and the year coming, and we stay with May 1. If for any reason that deadline is changed, we'll accommodate it on the state side. And what that means is Robert Brunn and his team will run packaging scenarios to see if funding can be maintained at the current level for Mass Grant as far as the individual awards, or whether we can increase or decrease depending on funding. But I can say that with the deadline, any student that meets that deadline is guaranteed a Mass Grant if they meet all other criteria. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this over to Robert Brunn, because I don't, this is his thing. Okay, Robert, go ahead, and you're on mute.
Thank you, Clantha, and good morning, everyone. I think where Clantha is temporarily leaving here is perhaps a very good opportunity or transition to my part of the presentation. What I want to speak to you about is something that the Department of Higher Education, along with the Education Secretary of Education's office, recently put together and deployed to our production environment. And it's called the Cost of Attendance Tool, as well as the availability of state financial aid programs. What that does for us is really enable our office to begin to be in touch with certain students grouping that typically would not contact until probably sometime in the spring. What we've done in the past is pretty much receive FAFSA records as they come in. We would store them in a file, and then at point in time that we're ready to begin our processing year, we would load all these records into production and begin to send out notifications to students, and obviously via email and in hard copy format if an email is not valid or not available. But the tool was really, again, as I mentioned, a collaborative effort between multiple departments. And what happens is we send out notices to first year never attended. Again, note here, first year never attended. So if a student filed a FAFSA in the past and they had attended for maybe a term and dropped off and were just returning, they will not hear from us. But this is going out strictly to first year never attended. So typically your high school cohort that's going to college starting in the fall of 2023. So we send those students a notice of their FAFSA status. On the next slide, what happens there is if the student has to have a calculated EFC, an estimated family contribution. If not, we automatically refer them to the Federal Processing Center to make corrections. Typically, if you don't have an EFC, it means that your FAFSA was not fully completed, or certain data points or data pieces were not properly reported or not reported at all. However, if the student has a calculated EFC, we pivot them to the cost of attendance and state financial aid eligibility tool. What happens there with student is they are able to see their EFC as reported on their FAFSA, as well as any full-time Pell amount they may qualify for, mass grant, if those the EFC requirements are met for both programs. You should also know that the mass grant program steers the Pell EFC table. So whatever that number is between 0 and I believe in 23, 24, that's not available yet. So we currently are using 22, 23 EFC to calculate the Pell amount as well as our mass grant, again, which is also estimated and reflects current year values. On the next screen, we talked about a series of data matches that we do. So what happens there, the cost of attendance wants to introduce the students to state financial aid programs. Obviously, we have way more than the 10 that we currently display, but we obtain data from multiple sources, from FAFSA certainly, and from DESE, from Gear Up, and we also will be entering in an agreement with the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families to obtain their data, so we can load that into our system, so we are able to show the students eligibility for any of the programs that fall under the umbrella of DCF. We also display the first 4 institutions that are the students is as listed on their FAFSA and provide the cost of attendance for each of those campuses. We obtain data from Peterson's, which is a clearinghouse. In fact, I should also give kudos to our good friends at MEFA for helping us identify Peterson's as a source for cost of attendance, which we can display on the screen to students. So if they have any of our Massachusetts institutions listed in the first 4 positions on their FAFSA, these costs will be automatically displayed. We also give them the ability to select from a drop-down other Massachusetts institutions that they might be considering and see the cost for those as well. But more importantly, we provide our participating institutions, our Massachusetts schools, the ability to update those costs if in fact the Peterson's data is a little bit dated, so they can at least present more up-to-date cost information to their students in their effort to make comparisons about which schools cost more or less. I have a couple of slides that I have included in my presentation, and the first one here is a flow of how this data is received and loaded into our system. Again, the first thing is that the student sits and completes their FAFSA. It's received at the Federal Processing Center, and typically within 72 hours, a record of that FAFSA is shared with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And as you know, that anyone in the state who files a FAFSA as a Mass resident would have their information shared with our office, the Office of Student Financial Assistance. What we do is, again, the third option there is to send a student notice to tell them that we have their FAFSA, and certainly to give them some information about the status of their FAFSA. And again, as mentioned earlier, if they don't have an EFC calculated, then we refer them back to the Federal Processing Center. What's more, excuse me, losing my voice here this morning. What's more important, though, is that, again, we are showing them the cost of attendance at the first 4 institutions, and then give them the opportunity to select other institutions that they may be interested in that are located here in Massachusetts. And of course, we are continuing to receive and upload their FAFSA data if they go in and make corrections. For instance, for someone who may have not had a calculated EFC on their original FAFSA transaction, then chances are we'll receive a correction FAFSA, which we'll upload in our system, which hopefully will now have a calculated EFC, and obviously it gives them access to all financial aid programs, not only state, but federal as well as institutional aid. The next screen is, and I know it's hard for you to read, and I know Julie is going to be sharing this PowerPoint with you at some point, so you'll be able to kind of read through some of that yourself. This is a case of a student that had a calculated EFC, and he's able to go on the screen here, and they can see, they can click where it says, click here, and I think we showing a challenge or something. They can go out to the other side and see the cost of attendance for those programs, for those institutions. You'd also see that not only are we talking to the student about cost of attendance, but they also will see possible eligibility for, and that's on the left side of the screen there on the menu bar. They'll see other state financial aid programs being qualified for. What happens is we have a lot of data stored in our system. So when we load a FAFSA record, determination of eligibility takes place for not just Mass, but a variety of other state financial aid programs. And once a student sets up a user account, he or she is able to go out there and begin to research those programs and update their record to make sure that they bring themselves to the point of eligibility. So it's a really two-pronged approach where they have access to cost of attendance information, but also see live eligibility data for financial aid that may be available to them in the coming year. The next screen is exactly what I had mentioned. You'll see near the top of the screen, the 4 columns there where we are listing institutions. You'd also see a little arrow pointing down, which means that the student can go in and have a drop down and select any of our Massachusetts institutions. and up will come the cost as we have it from Peterson's or as updated by its institutions. The cost breakdown involve housing and fees, tuition, room and board, transportation, and any other cost that Peterson may have had on file for that institution. And this is the other part that works well, where they actually, each column represents an institution, and where you see the green check mark, it means that the student is eligible for that program. MassGrant being the flagship program in Massachusetts, obviously will be highly accessible to most of our students. And these other ones obviously will depend on whether or not the student, there's a good match between our data and the FAFSA. For instance, if the student was designated as an Adams Scholar, they would have a green check if they were in fact going to be attending a public institution here in Massachusetts. Similarly, if they were going to attend one of our private independent colleges, universities, they could qualify for Gilbert grant. Let's say that's a program that's entirely geared to our private institutions. And where you see the orange question mark, it only means that when they click there, the student will go out to a set of questions again, and that's primarily for DCF to self-identify as a DCF student, and they are able to access programs such as tuition, adopted fee waiver, or foster care fee waiver, or foster child grant program. As I mentioned earlier, we hope to soon have a memorandum of understanding signed with DCF, and that should enable us to receive a file from DCF, which we can load into our system. And if, as such, the student will not have to answer questions, they'll just be identified through a data match. I think my last screen here, if there's anything on it. Clantha, I think this is really your sandbox here, although I'm happy to kind of rummage through some of that if you want me to.
Okay, Julie, just a time check.
Yes, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And let me see. I do have one question.
Okay.
Is there a demo of this cost of attendance tool that a counselor could use in a classroom setting?
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. We have one that I'm happy to share. In fact, I think you have it. I think I shared it with you, and I'm happy to send it again, but feel free to disseminate that, and they can certainly display it in a classroom or any other venue they might choose.
That's great. So we will put that link attached to this lesson in the MEFA Institute, and I will also send it to all of you who are on the call. Thank you so much. Good idea.
Sure.
Great. Okay, I'm going to do a magic show and get through these slides in 4 minutes, okay? Highlighting. So I mentioned before that MassGrant is our signature program, awarding about 40,000 students a year. The good news is that this year we were able to increase the maximum award from 2,200 to 2,800 for students who qualify for the max. That's really good news, and we are hoping to even do better next year. And that's with the deadline being extended to August 1, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. I really want to talk a little bit about the Herder Scholarship Program. And first, apologize to all of our counselors out there who worked with us this past year on this program. If we go to the next slide, Julie, last year, our online application didn't work as well, but this is a competitive 4-year scholarship that students are nominated, and you nominate students, either they're juniors or sophomores. And these students, if they get awarded, can take this scholarship anywhere that they'd like within the USA. And the average award goes from about $16,000 to $20,000 a year. We may be increasing that in the future, so you will want to work with us. But if we go to the next slide.
Yes.
So I am promising you a new and improved online application for 23. We anticipate that this online application may be available sometime in December or probably at least in January. Robert and I are going to a meeting in an hour to talk about the whole layout of this. And depending on when it's released, I'm going to anticipate that the deadline could be something like March, but and that's just an anticipated deadline for applications. But you know, the online application will allow you counselors or other school administrators as the nominator to submit the application information, recommendations, and things like that. And we are really working to fine tune and streamline this process so that it will work and it will not be cumbersome. So we hope that you will come back to the table with this program and get your students excited about submitting an application. Next slide. 25 students a year. It's very competitive. We spend about $1.2 million, but we can increase that depending on the schools that the students attend. And it is awarded as the last dollar. And for the most part, the $20,000 is awarded, but some of our HERDA students get their need completely met. So we do not need to assist them, at least in the first year, sometimes throughout all 4 years. Well worth your while. Next slide. Adams Scholarship. What I will say, this has been around since 2006, right, with the graduating class, and that the Department of Elementary Secondary Ed made some accommodations, revisions to the selection process based on what we experienced with COVID and rescheduling certain tests and things like that. I'm hoping that that worked out pretty well. I believe that all of the letters for eligible students were delivered in October, if not late September. And the good news for us is if a student loses that letter, they can just contact our office and we are able to reproduce that. Before, students needed to go back to DESE, and it was kind of a hit or miss because they did not really have a designated person for that, but we've worked out yet another partnership with students. So if you are working with a student in May, they don't have the letter, don't worry, just connect with our office and we'll take care of that. Next slide. About 280,000 students have been assisted with the Adams Scholarship, usually about 18,000 a year. And the average amount of tuition credited under this program is somewhere around $16 to $17 million each year. The good news is that tuition has an increase at our campuses. It's the fees, but the Adams does not cover fees. And we do have to go through that song and dance with some parents every year. Student maintains a 3.0. The scholarship is renewed, and some students might run into complications, need a waiver or eligibility extended. They can contact the office, and if it meets certain criteria, we can help the student continue with the Adams. Next slide. Coplet Certificate of Mastery. My office is not too engaged in that, except for the process of getting this credit for students. This is really handled by the Department of Elementary Secondary Ed. And Julie, if you flip to that next slide there, you'll see that Alexia Cribbs is the contact. And I do advise that people connect with her. It's our understanding that once decisions are made, that information can be pulled down by the school counselor. So I will refer you back to DESE with this. And I know I have 2 more programs to quickly get through, and I will do that in 30 seconds. Tuition waiver, I'm listing the number of, or the various types of waivers that you may be more familiar with. One that's surfacing now, the valedictorian waiver. We have more students coming after that, and they simply need to provide a final transcript to their college that shows that they were the designated valedictorian for their high school. But the thing about tuition waivers is the student can only get their tuition waived once. So in cases where they qualify for multiple waivers, they have to decide which waiver. Okay, foster child grant, I mentioned that before. It's a $6,000 last dollar scholarship awarded to students who have extended services with DCF beyond age 18. And I think the number hovers around 250, maybe closer to 300 students a year who receive this, and they can go anywhere for this scholarship. And then the next slide is about the sister program, I believe, which is the Adopted and Fee Assistance Program. This is I guess it's a much larger award. So foster students can also get this, and it would cover their tuition and fees. If you're a foster kid, you may also get $6,000 from the other program. But the Commonwealth has made a commitment to families who adopted children out of foster care. That commitment is that if they attend a public college or university, we will pay for their education. And for any student who was in foster care, that same commitment, all in efforts of getting our students to have that educational opportunity so that they can then enrich their lives and be a contributing member of society. And I think that might be it for our slides. There's a contact information. I know I breezed through the last ones pretty quickly, but it's all on our website. And here's our contact information for Robert and myself. Do keep that. And I will tell you, I list my mobile number there because I do encourage people to call.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I think the very last slide just says questions. Contact and then questions. Yes.
I'll see if there are any last questions.
Mhm.
Let me just see. And I don't see any, but
Okay.
thank you so much, both of you. This was a wealth of information. And thank you for the questions that came in. And I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll get that tool out to you on the cost calculator. So have a great rest of the year, great holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Bye, folks.